Well, thank you all very much. We obviously are very happy with the news that the governor has announced that he will let the budget impasse come to an end by allowing the 15-16 budget that we passed him with bipartisan support in the House and the Senate last week become law, as well as the non-preferred appropriations. We certainly recognize there are some challenges out there for 16-17. We want to get started immediately on passing a fiscally sound and sustainable budget for 16-17, and I believe we're going to have staff start meeting on Monday to do so. Obviously, the last year has been a struggle. It's had its ups and downs, but we are very happy to see a budget become law that has a record increase for education, record spending for higher education, early childhood education, and higher education and basic education as well. So we applaud the governor for his willingness to allow that budget to become law and his willingness to move on to the 16-17 budget.
Excuse my voice, suffering from a little bit of a cold, but just to reiterate what Dave said, it's certainly been a long time coming. We're certainly hopeful that the governor sticks by his comments today and allows the budget to become law, and we can bring this 15-16 saga to an end. It's certainly something that we hadn't anticipated to be all the way till March, but it has been. And by closing out 15-16, as we mentioned last week, allows us to move forward to 16-17. So if the governor has decided indeed to allow it to become law, we're grateful and happy about that. And we'll begin to take on the challenges of the future. But there are some challenges, and we will take them on. I guess he did indicate he's going to veto the fiscal code. We had to look at the ramifications of that, but at this point we'll focus on the GA bill and the non-preferreds, and be glad that we're now moving forward and we can get to the 16-17 budget. Well, look, again, we've just heard what he's going to do, so we're going to look at it. Obviously, the most pressing thing is PlanCon. The governor, the School Board Association, the School Professional Businessmen Association of the schools were here today talking about the need for PlanCon and the need for school construction funding. And by this veto, we already have a backlog. He just increased that backlog. So that's clearly something we're going to have to look at. We may have to take up a separate piece of legislation immediately to try to deal with that. But that's probably the most pressing issue that I know of off the top of my head in the fiscal code, that if he vetoes. Well, it'll be able to go, the formula's in the fiscal code. So the fair funding formula that he says he's for, he vetoed. So I don't know if he's vetoed it yet, so I shouldn't say that. But obviously that formula is gone, and he will, I guess, continue to drive it out the way he sees fit, as he's done so far. So we'll have to take a look at that and see if there's any way to deal with that issue.
What reason is there to think that next year will be any different than this year?
Well, look, I don't know. We all lived through this, and it was difficult to live through for not just the General Assembly, the governor, but for the people of Pennsylvania. And so hopefully we will come to next year with the spirit that we need to get this done. Obviously, I think the people of Pennsylvania has driven us to this point. So we're going to continue to negotiate with the governor and hopefully get something in place a lot sooner than this year.
Are you aware of any changes in positions?
Excuse me?
Are you aware of any changes in positions among the parties?
No, I mean, not really. I mean, look, we're struggling through it all together. Now, we got a 15-16 budget in place. We got a baseline to work off of. And again, revenues will be a last resort for us. Yes, we concur that there's a structural deficit, but there's two ways to deal with the structural deficit. One is to reduce the spend, and two is to increase revenue. The governor's been very clear that he wants to increase revenue. Our preferable approach is to reduce the spend. And so we will continue that discussion and see where we can meet to get a compromise.
One of the things on the fiscal code prevents basic education funding from getting to schools and counties from getting money and things like that.
Well, the counties already have their money. The governor signed that budget in December, so the human services money has already been out. The education and money will go out. There's determination on exactly how that will go is yet to be determined, but the money will go out.
So there's no concern that the extra education funding that you appropriated will run into any trouble without a fiscal code?
We've got to look at the ramifications of what he potentially does with the fiscal code. Obviously, our preference would be for him to sign the fiscal code. If there are ramifications that we need to consider other legislation to rectify, we can do that in a timely fashion, I'm sure.
Okay, just a point of clarification on that. In that fiscal code, did that use the fair funding formula just for the new money?
Yes.
Okay, the base money was going out under last
Correct.
year's.
Yes.
Correct.
So you're not clear with the ratification part of money.
Well, again, he hasn't vetoed it yet, so we have to. He said he's going to. We have to look at it when he does, and then we'll make a decision at that point. Aaron. No, the funding formula was put into the fiscal code. Normally we do a school code, but we did it, just to help expedite the process. We did it. We put the school funding formula in the fiscal code this year.
But you're not clear what the ramifications are.
Tony, he just announced he was going to let the bill become law 10 minutes ago. We have to evaluate all the potential ramifications, and we're going to work with the administration, and we're going to work with the House Democrats and the Senate Democrats and everybody to try to not just, if there's anything that has to be wrapped up as a result of that, so be it. We want to get on to 16, 17, and there's been a lot of work done over the last year on some very big issues: pension reform, liquor reform, property tax reform, you name it. We don't want to start from the beginning. We want to build on that progress and try to get it done in an expedited fashion.
So what's the increase in here for basic ed?
I think the total increase for basic ed, you've got a $150 million increase in the basic education line item, plus you have the $50 million increase that the governor signed into law back in December with the Ready to Learn block grant. So you got $200 million total just in K through 12 education, and that's in addition to the higher ed increases, the early childhood education increases, and the special education increases.
Gentlemen, do you think pensions, liquor, and everything else that happened this budget is going to be part of next budget too?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Hey,
Well, if that's the case, I see Speaker Terzai is not with you, gentlemen. Is he on board with what you just said, that is the case, or is he on something else?
I think we're just the two folks who are lucky enough to be leaders who came out here together. Our entire leadership teams, we finished up the action on the House floor. The Speaker was with me meeting with the governor earlier, right before his announcement. We are committed together to try to rectify 16, 17 as quickly as possible, close any structural deficit that might exist, and move on with a lot of these issues.
What in this
Last
9
Wednesday-
months, what has happened in this 9 months? Are there any winners, losers? I mean, it took 9 months to get to this point.
Well, look, I don't want to tally up winners and losers. That's, I guess, for Terry Madonna to do and folks like him to characterize what winners and losers are. It's disappointing that we're here. I've said that all along. It's not something we're proud of, that it took 9 months to get a budget into place. 9 months overdue. So hopefully we can move this in much more expedited fashion this year so we don't have that problem. But the good news is it is done, and we can move forward now.
Speaking of losers, the idea that these non-practice schools are tied to just some restitution on interest money, where does that stand now?
Well, there was no specific money in the general appropriation bill to deal with interest. Now, obviously, they have more money, the $200 million that Representative Reed talked about, but there's no specific money for interest itself.
Senator, how can you say it's done? We don't have a fiscal code. I know you said he hasn't vetoed it yet, but he says he will. And granted,
Well, again, the general appropriation bill would be done if he lets it become law. The fiscal code we will do an analysis on, and if there's anything we have to come back and finish up. But the money will be going out to schools, at least at the 14, 15 level. The money will be going out. The money will go into yes. I mean, he's been sending the money out without a funding formula already. The first 6 months he did without a funding formula. So the money will go out. The money will now go to higher education. The money will go to agriculture, the agriculture ag script programs. The money will go to the hospitals. So all that money is going to go out. So from that perspective, that's all very positive and things that are completed that we need to get completed. If there are some things, because he vetoes a fiscal code that, as Representative Reed come back and we can deal with independently through legislation, we will do that. But as I said, he just announced it. I don't think he's done it yet. So I don't know if it's a full veto. I guess Governor Corbett line item, some lines in there. So I don't know. I think he said he was going to do a full veto, but he said something different last week too. So we'll just wait to see ultimately what he does.
The governor last Wednesday basically said he was going to veto the budget package. Are you guys surprised that he took this move today?
We're just glad. that we can move on to 16-17. And I don't think that's just a Republican perspective. I think it's a Democratic perspective as well. We want to try to get to 16-17 as soon as possible. We don't want to draw this out for another 9 months. There are decisions that are going to have to be made. We want to make those decisions, bring some of the other items that we've talked about back to the table and see if we can finally get them all over the goal line in a timely fashion. You know, there are dates out there. You know, you got a bond rating potential impact at the beginning of June. You know, we'd like to see how much progress we can make before then so that we don't have any of those negative ramifications. So I think more than anything, we're just happy that he made this decision and ready to move on.
Do you think
the possibility of an override was part of the calculation of his work? Do you think it was a real possibility?
Look, I can't speak to how the governor came to his conclusion, what information he considered. You know, obviously the bill's passed with bipartisan support in the House and the Senate. We're just committed to working together going forward and to not be in this position again.
I'm enjoying the stink bug walking across the podium. I'm not sure if there's some sort of underlying story with that, but look, same thing that Dave said. We don't know what goes into the governor's thinking. You have to ask him. As we said last week, some of the points that he was concerned about, the structural deficit and things of that nature, we concur with. But they pale in comparison to what would have happened if we didn't have a budget in place. You know, when schools are running out of money, schools are going to close, that's a real problem. That's a real life problem for individuals, citizens of Pennsylvania. And so the overriding concern was to get that money out. I think the governor realized that. Hopefully he realized that. And he took our you know, asking of him to let it become law or to at least sign it, so that those families, those citizens of Pennsylvania wouldn't have to face that real life decision of deciding, what am I going to do with my kids today if the school's closed? What am I going to do if I'm not getting paid? How am I going to pay my mortgage if I'm an employee of the school district? So getting a budget done was, I think, and hopefully the governor realized, it was more important than any structural deficit or anything else that's still out there that we have agreed that we need to address.
But do you guys believe you would have? Do you guys believe that you would have won a veto battle? Veto override battle?
That's a question for Senator Costa and Representative Dermody. You know, obviously we don't have 2/3 of majorities in either chamber yet, and we probably would have moved in that direction if he'd have vetoed it all. Whether we'd have got the votes, you know, obviously that's something you want to ask them. But clearly, I think there was concern on their part that they would have, just judging by the vote counts and the public statements made by some of the Democrats in the General Assembly over the last week.
Deficit, depending on who's counting, is minimum of like 5%, $1.5 billion. Are you going to cut all that to close that deficit, or is there give and take on both ends of this? What could happen next year?
I think we want to get the budget back in line. Whatever those numbers are, we've got to work through together. You know, obviously the lower spend number this year is helpful to reducing that deficit next year. And, you know, before we get to any discussion on new monies for any particular line items, we have to try to find a way to rectify that and to bring that into line. We are committed to doing so, but I think the governor letting this bill become law is a positive step in that direction, because the spend number is $800 million less than he had put out there on the table in November and December. So that's $800 million that we don't have to come up with for next year. So it's a positive step in the right direction.
Are you looking at more of a cost to carry budget for 2016-17 and addressing structural deficit issues? Or?
Well, look, I mean, that's a starting point, obviously, and then we hope to reduce that cost to carry by maybe reforms and things of that nature to help offset some of those significant costs. That's obviously what's driving all our budgetary problems is the cost to carry, whether that be pensions, whether that be health care, prison population, all these issues, debt service that we're trying to deal with to reform that, to lower that number. That's the first priority, is to lower what that cost to carry forward is. But obviously, you have to know what your mandated spending is, and then build off of that if you do want to increase any. So obviously, you start there. All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.